Graham Smith from ALEC here again. Let's have a look at what you need to know for assessment task 6. This relates to assessing your learner's progress. Okay, here's our overview of the course again, so you can see where you're at in terms of the training and assessment tasks. And we've worked our way through, nearly through the whole cycle, and we're up to number 6 here on the infographic. So it's about assessing progress, assessing your learner's literacy and numeracy progress. So make sure you've got your assessment guide handy and your study guide handy so you can dip into those for the extra information that you might need. There's not too much to talk about here, as it's really just a rerun of some of the things that we covered in section 4. So everything that you know about diagnostic assessment and formative assessment, that applies here. Just a quick recap, talking about those different kinds of assessment, and we mentioned this earlier on. If you think of yourself as a photographer taking a snapshot at the beginning, the middle and the end of a race, and when you take that snapshot at the beginning of the race, that's like your initial and diagnostic assessment, and a bit further along the race, a bit further along the track, you're taking another photograph. That's formative and diagnostic assessment as well. And at the end of the race, you take another snapshot. We can call that summative assessment. So really what we are talking about here is the second point, the second assessment point. So you did some pre-assessment testing, you did some diagnostic testing as part of task 4, and with task 5 you've done some embedded literacy and numeracy training. Those are your literacy and numeracy interventions, and now what we need you to do is assess your learners again. So this is kind of like your second assessment point. It might not exactly be at the end of the race, but it's definitely somewhere along the way for the learner. And just so we're clear on differences between formative and summative assessment, formative assessment is assessment for learning. So it's to do with forming the learner and informing your teaching. And even though this is kind of a post-test, it's still really formative assessment because it's informing how you're going to carry on teaching. Like I said in one of the other slideshows and presentations, this is part of bookending your teaching. This is the final bookend. So task 4 was the pre-test, that's like the first bookend. Task 5 is the teaching part. Task 6, the evidence that you need to write up for this task, is the final bookend. So that's your post-assessment or post-test. Make sure that as you do this, that you build in lots of opportunities for feedback and self-assessment as well. So you'll need to report on both of those things in the template, either in this template for task 6 or later in the task 7 evaluation template. So you need to give your learners lots of feedback, and you need to make sure that you're giving them a chance to self-assess as well. And make sure you do something to summarize the results. So in the template there's a table, and you can use that table, you can modify it, summarize your results in writing as well. So just a summary here, things that you need to do. You need to assess your learners' literacy and numeracy progress. So you need to use literacy and numeracy assessment tools and processes to do that, and the simplest, the easiest way to do this is to reuse the tools that you created for task 4. You might want to create a version B of these tools, or if it's appropriate you might just be able to reuse the exact same assessments again. So make sure that you use at least 2 assessments, one for literacy and one for numeracy, and make these contextualized to your training context. You don't need to reuse the TEC assessment tool here. We use that in task 4 as a big picture diagnostic, but our time frame is usually too short that it doesn't make sense to use it again here. You'll need to use it yourself later on for your organization, but for our purposes, 2 mini teacher-made assessments, one for literacy, one for numeracy, and these need to connect back with what you created for task 4 and relate to the work that you've done in task 5. So make sure you've got evidence for at least 2 learners as well. You can always do more than 2 learners, but we need a minimum of 2 learners to meet the standard. Relate your findings to your goals, your learners' goals and your program goals, and you do this in the template when you're writing up your results. And talk about the literacy and numeracy skills that you identified, whether you've seen any change or not. talk about the kind of feedback that you've been giving your learners through the process, and where you have built in self-assessment tasks for your learners, talk about that as well. Right, that's pretty much everything you need to know for task 6. Make sure you have a look in the assessment guide. There's a checklist there, and there's a paper copy of the template. Of course, you can download the template from our website as well. Thanks very much. Kia ora.